The smell hit you before you turned the corner. Charcoal lighter fluid and something sweet dripping through the grate. Your father stood over a kettle grill in a short-sleeved shirt, turning things with the only pair of tongs the house owned. Your mother came through the screen door carrying a bowl of something cold, a dish towel draped over the top to keep the flies out. Every family on the block had the same setup: a folding table, a bag of ice in a cooler, and a screen door that slammed 40 times before the sun went down. Nobody sent invitations. The smoke was the invitation. Number 19 fed a whole cul-de-sac from one cast iron pot. And the recipe at number 1 took all day to finish, and not one person complained about the wait. These were the dishes that brought the whole street into the yard. So hit subscribe, because these are 30 forgotten neighborhood cookout recipes 1960s families swore by. Number 30, Lipton onion dip with ridged potato chips. 1 packet of Lipton onion soup mix stirred into a pint of sour cream. That was the whole recipe. You could find it printed right on the side of the box, and by 1958 half, the country had memorized it. The ridged chips were important. Flat chips broke. You needed something sturdy enough to hold a thick scoop without folding over in your hand. This showed up at every cookout from Memorial Day through September, and it was always the first thing gone. The bowl sat on the folding table next to the paper plates, and kids went through it before the meat was off the grill. It cost about 30 cents to make. Nobody ever tried to improve it because nothing needed improving. Number 29, deviled eggs. Somebody's mother always showed up with a plate of them, arranged in a circle on one of those special divided trays that existed for no other purpose. The filling was simple: yolks mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, and a pinch of salt. A shake of paprika on top for color. Some women added sweet pickle relish. Others stirred in a drop of Worcestershire and called it their secret. The eggs had to stay cold. If they sat in the sun too long, the mayonnaise turned dangerous, and everybody knew it, but nobody ever threw them out until the plate was picked clean. You ate 2 standing up before you ever sat down with a real plate. They were the appetizer nobody called an appetizer, and the tray they came on was more important than the recipe itself. Before I go any further, for those of you who have been looking for these kinds of old-fashioned recipes all gathered in one place, I have the Vintage Recipe Guide waiting for you. It is full of the meals you grew up eating. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I am not going to mention it again. If you want it, it is there. Now back to the list. Number 28, cucumber and onion salad in ice water. Thin slices of cucumber and white onion, separated into rings, dropped into a bowl of white vinegar, a little sugar, salt, pepper, and enough cold water to cover everything. It sat in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours before it came outside. Some people added a splash of oil. Most left it alone. The bowl came out sweating by the time the coals were hot, and it stayed on the table all afternoon without turning. The vinegar kept it safe in the heat far longer than anything made with mayonnaise, which is why women who cooked for crowds always trusted it. You served it with a slotted spoon so the liquid stayed behind. Light and sharp and cold. The perfect side next to a plate full of heavy grilled meat. Number 27, Italian sausage with grilled peppers and onions. The links came from the butcher counter or the Italian grocery if your neighborhood had one. Sweet or hot, depending on the family and who was doing the shopping. They went straight on the grate, no foil, and you turned them slowly until the casing split and the fat hit the coals with a hiss that made everybody look over. Sliced bell peppers and thick onion wedges cooked right alongside them on the hottest part of the grate. Everything came off at the same time, piled onto a hoagie roll or eaten straight off the plate with a fork. The Italian and the Polish families brought this to every block party, and within a couple years the rest of the street started making it too. The smell alone was enough to pull people across the yard. Number 26, marinated flank steak sliced thin against the grain. Flank was cheap in the 1960s. Butchers treated it as a tough cut, which meant nobody paid much for it, and that is exactly why families feeding 6 kids on one paycheck kept coming back for it. The marinade was soy sauce, garlic, a little Worcestershire, and oil. Some cooks added brown sugar for a glaze. You let it sit in the refrigerator overnight, then grilled it fast over high heat, 3 or 4 minutes aside and no more. The whole secret was in the slicing. Cut with the grain, and it chewed like shoe leather. Cut against it, and it fell apart on the plate. The slices fanned across a wooden cutting board set in the middle of the table, and they were gone before the second round of anything else. Number 25. Foil-wrapped potatoes buried in the coals. A russet potato, poked a few times with a fork, rubbed with butter or bacon grease, and wrapped tight in a double layer of aluminum foil. You pushed it into the hot coals at the edge of the grill and left it alone for 45 minutes. When you pulled it out with tongs and peeled back the foil, the skin was charred in spots and the inside was soft and steaming white. Butter, sour cream, and salt were the standard toppings. Some people crumbled bacon on top. Kids loved these because it felt like cooking something secret inside the fire. Every father had his own theory about how long they took, and not one of them ever bothered with a timer. The cookout was never about one dish. It was about the table. A folding table with legs that never sat even, set up on the grass or the driveway, covered with a plastic cloth that blew up at the corners every time the breeze caught it. Somebody put a can on each corner to hold it down. The table told you who lived on that street. A casserole from the Baptist family, a sausage dish from the house with the Italian grandmother, a bowl of something nobody could name from the couple who had just moved in from up north. Nobody planned it. You put out what you had, and between all of it, there was always enough. That was the whole system. Number 24, chicken kebabs with canned pineapple chunks. Boneless chicken cut into cubes, soaked in a mixture of soy sauce, pineapple juice straight from the can, and garlic powder, then threaded onto metal skewers with pineapple chunks and squares of green pepper in between. The sugar in the juice caramelized on the grill and gave the chicken a sticky glaze you could not get any other way. Wooden skewers caught fire on the grill. Everybody learned that exactly once before switching to metal. The Hawaiian craze hit American home cooking hard in the late 1950s, and by the mid-1960s, these showed up at cookouts from California to Connecticut. They looked harder to make than they were, which gave whoever brought them a little extra credit at the table. Number 23, baked beans with brown sugar and bacon. Canned pork and beans, usually Van Camp's, poured into a deep baking dish. Then brown sugar, yellow mustard, ketchup, and a splash of Worcestershire stirred in until the color deepened. Strips of raw bacon laid flat across the top. The dish baked at 350 degrees for a full hour, and it came to the cookout in the same pan with a serving spoon stuck right in it. The bacon rendered down into the sauce. The brown sugar turned to caramel at the edges, and the beans thickened into something you could pile on a plate without them running all over the place. Every neighborhood had one person who made these better than everybody else, and that person was expected to bring them to every gathering without exception. Number 22, creamy coleslaw with celery seed. A head of green cabbage shredded on a box grater, mixed with grated carrot and dressed with mayonnaise, a little sugar, white vinegar, and celery seed. The celery seed was what separated the real slaw from the watery store-bought kind you got in a plastic tub. Without it, you just had dressed cabbage. The whole bowl needed at least an hour in the refrigerator before serving, so the sugar dissolved and the shreds softened just enough to lose their raw bite. It went next to the ribs, next to the hot dogs, next to anything that came off the grill. One dish that appeared on every single plate. Nobody deliberately went back for seconds, but the bowl was always scraped clean by the time the sun dropped. Number 21, yellow mustard potato salad. Not the fancy kind with fresh herbs and red potatoes cut into perfect cubes. The yellow kind. Boiled potatoes broken into rough chunks, mixed with mayonnaise, bright yellow mustard, chopped hard-boiled eggs, sweet pickle relish, diced celery, and enough salt and pepper to taste from across the table. Some families added raw onion. Others considered onion in potato salad a serious offense. The mustard turned the whole bowl a pale golden color that told you exactly what you were eating before you ever picked up a spoon. Every family on the block believed theirs was the definitive version. The only real argument was whether you served it cold or let it come to room temperature. Both sides had strong feelings and neither was going to move. Number 20, the relish tray. A divided glass dish, sometimes crystal if the hostess wanted to set a tone before the grill was even lit. Celery sticks in one section, green olives stuffed with pimento in another, sweet gherkin pickles in the third, sometimes black olives, sometimes carrot sticks, sometimes radishes carved into little roses that took more patience than anyone wanted to admit. The tray came out before anything else and stayed on the table all day. Children picked every olive clean and left the celery completely untouched. Adults ate the celery later when they were pretending not to go back for another plate of meat. The dish itself was the kind of thing a woman received as a wedding present in 1952 and used at every gathering for the next 30 years. Number 19, Brunswick stew cooked in a cast iron pot over an open fire. This was the dish that separated a real cookout from just grilling a few burgers in the yard. You needed a big pot, a stand to hold it over the coals, and a long wooden paddle for stirring. The base was tomato, canned or fresh depending on the season and what the garden had. Then came the meat, usually pulled pork or chicken left over from an earlier cook, shredded into the pot by hand. After that, lima beans, corn kernels cut from the cob, diced potatoes, and okra if you were far enough south for it to grow in the yard. Some cooks added a splash of vinegar at the end. Others dropped in hot sauce and called it finished. The recipe changed depending on whether you were in Virginia, Georgia, or North Carolina, and all three states would tell you with a straight face that they invented it. Virginia pointed to an 1828 hunting camp along the Nottoway River and a cook named Jimmy Matthews who put squirrel in the pot and let it go all day. Georgia had an entire town named Brunswick and a commemorative iron pot sitting in the public square to prove the claim. North Carolina stayed quiet and just kept making theirs. Nobody has ever settled that argument, and nobody is going to. What mattered was the size of the pot. A real Brunswick stew was never made for 4 people. It was made for 40. The cook started before dawn and stood by the fire all day, stirring with that paddle, adjusting the coals, adding things as the afternoon wore on. Neighbors wandered over to check on it the way you would check on somebody recovering from surgery. They looked into the pot, nodded, and said it was coming along fine. By the time the sun dropped and the coals burned to white ash, you ladled it into a bowl and ate it standing in the grass. It was brown and thick and plain-looking, and it was the best thing at the entire cookout. There is something about fire and smoke that changes the way people act around each other. Inside the house, dinner was private. You set the table, you ate, you cleaned up, and nobody outside the family saw what you had. But when the grill came out, everything went public. Your cooking was on display, your yard was on display, your chairs, your kids, your lawn, all of it visible from the sidewalk. And instead of making people nervous, it loosened them up. The grill gave men who never spoke to each other all winter a reason to stand in the same circle. It gave women who normally just waved from the driveway a reason to walk across the grass carrying something covered in foil. The food was the excuse. The company was the whole point. Number 18, pork spare ribs smoked low and slow, not baby backs. Full spare ribs from the belly side, with more fat and more flavor than the smaller rack. You rubbed them the night before with salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, and cayenne, then wrapped them in wax paper and let them sit in the refrigerator overnight. Next morning, they went on the grill off to the side, away from direct heat. You kept the temperature low by controlling the vents and left them alone for 3 hours. After that, you started brushing on sauce in thin layers every 30 minutes, building it up like paint on a barn wall. By the time they came off, the outside was nearly black and the meat pulled clean from the bone without any resistance. The man who ran the ribs was always the quiet one. He stood by the grill, watched the smoke, checked the vents, and waited. Number 17, hot dogs split down the middle and grilled flat. A regular hot dog, usually Oscar Mayer or whatever store brand was on sale, sliced lengthwise without cutting all the way through so it opened flat like a book. You pressed it down on the grate, cut side against the heat. The edges curled and browned and got crispy in a way a round hot dog just rolling around the grill could never match. The flat surface gave you twice the char and twice the crunch. Kids loved them because the split shape held mustard and relish in the groove instead of letting everything slide off the side. Some fathers scored the casing in a crosshatch pattern instead of splitting it, which made the dog curl into a spiral on the grate. Both camps had their loyalists, and neither gave an inch. Number 16, corn pudding baked in a casserole dish. Fresh corn kernels scraped off the cob into a mixing bowl, then stirred together with beaten eggs, melted butter, a spoonful of sugar, flour, and whole milk until it was smooth and pourable. Some recipes called for cream-style corn from a can instead of fresh, which thickened the pudding without needing extra flour. The mixture went into a buttered baking dish and came out 45 minutes later puffed up and golden brown, with a texture somewhere between a soft custard and a slice of cornbread. Corn pudding was the dish people brought when they wanted something substantial that was neither a salad nor a dessert. It paired with everything on the table, sat there without drawing attention, and the dish always came back empty. Number 15, Texas toast buttered thick and grilled until golden. White bread sliced twice as thick as a regular loaf. Both sides spread heavy with soft butter all the way to the crusts. Some people shook garlic salt across the top. Others kept it plain and let the butter do the work. The slices went on the grill grate for about a minute each side, just long enough for the butter to melt into the bread and the surface to turn crisp and brown with dark marks from the bars. That toast soaked up barbecue sauce, caught the juices running off sliced meat, and gave you something solid to push the last bite of beans onto the fork. It was the cheapest item at any cookout, and it made everything around it taste better. One loaf served the whole table for less than half a dollar. Number 14, pasta salad with Italian dressing. This was the recipe that turned every church parking lot, barbecue, and neighborhood block party into something that smelled like it came from another country altogether. You boiled rotini or tricolor spiral noodles, drained them, and tossed them while still warm with bottled Italian dressing. Then chopped tomatoes, sliced black olives, cubed provolone, diced green pepper, thin red onion rings, and sometimes chunks of hard salami or pepperoni thrown in for weight. The Italian dressing soaked into the warm pasta and flavored it all the way through to the center, which is why every version of the recipe told you to dress it while it was hot. After it cooled in the refrigerator, you had to toss it again with more dressing because the noodles absorbed the first round and dried out completely. The dish started showing up in church cookbooks across the Midwest and the South starting in the early 1960s, right around the time bottled Italian dressing appeared on regular grocery store shelves for the first time. Before that, most American home cooks had never made a vinaigrette and did not own a bottle of olive oil. The dressing companies knew exactly what they were doing when they started printing recipes for pasta salad right on their labels. It was marketing wrapped in home cooking, and it worked perfectly. By the middle of the decade, you could not walk into a cookout anywhere between Ohio and Georgia without finding a big bowl of this on the table, usually covered in plastic wrap with a strip of masking tape on the side bearing somebody's first name in ballpoint pen. The women who made it never called it Italian pasta salad. They just called it pasta salad. The Italian was understood. You ate it cold, standing up, and if nobody was watching you, ate it straight from the serving spoon. Number 13, pickled beets and eggs. A dozen hard-boiled eggs, peeled and dropped whole into a jar of pickled beet juice. Some people made their own brine from scratch with white vinegar, sugar, whole cloves, and sliced beets. Others just poured off the liquid from a store-bought can and used that. Either way, the eggs sat in the refrigerator for 2 full days until they turned deep magenta all the way through to the yolk. Sliced in half, the white was stained bright pink, and the yolk sat in the center like a small yellow sun against the color. Pennsylvania Dutch families served these at every outdoor gathering without exception. The jar sat on the table right next to the condiments, and people either loved them deeply or refused to go near them. There was never any middle ground with a pickled egg. Number 12, Jell-O salad with fruit cocktail. A box of lime or cherry. Jell-O dissolved in boiling water. A can of fruit cocktail drained and stirred in. The whole mixture poured into a mold or a glass baking dish and set in the refrigerator to firm up. 4 hours later, you turned it out onto a serving plate. Some women folded in miniature marshmallows before it set. Others layered in cream cheese, beaten smooth with a little milk, which gave the mold a pastel stripe through the middle. It showed up at every cookout, reunion, and church supper from the 1950s, straight through the late 1970s, and it was always the most colorful thing on the table. Children ate it because it was sweet. Adults ate it because their mothers made it. It sat right next to the potato salad, and nobody questioned whether it belonged there. The cookout was the only meal in American life where nobody sat at the head of the table, because there was no head. There was a lawn chair, a porch step, and the open tailgate of a station wagon. You balanced a paper plate on your knee and hoped the breeze left your napkin alone. The food came from 5 different kitchens, and nobody kept track of who brought what until the end of the night when somebody needed their dish back. There were no courses and no rules about what belonged beside what. Baked beans and Jell-O salad on the same plate, and nobody so much as blinked. The cookout was the one place in American life where every rule about proper eating was suspended by agreement. Number 11, scalloped corn casserole. 2 cans of cream-style corn mixed with beaten eggs, crushed saltine crackers, melted butter, a little sugar, and enough milk to make the batter pourable. Into a greased baking dish, then 45 minutes in the oven until the center set firm and the top turned a deep golden brown. Some versions added diced onion or chopped green pepper for color. Most stayed plain. The texture was soft and rich, somewhere between a savory bread pudding and a dense corn soufflé. It was heavier than regular corn pudding, sweeter than plain creamed corn, and it traveled beautifully, which is why it rode to every cookout in a dish wrapped in a bath towel on the front passenger seat. You could bake it the night before and reheat it in 20 minutes flat. Number 10. Smoked sausage links with yellow mustard. Already fully cooked and smoked when you bought them from the deli counter, sold in a ring or in individual links. All you had to do was lay them on the grill until the casing tightened and the outside picked up dark marks from the grate. Some people sliced them into thick coins and served them on toothpicks as something to pick at while the real food cooked. Others served them whole, tucked into a hot dog bun. The brand depended entirely on where you lived. Hillshire Farm or Eckrick in the Midwest. Andouille if you were anywhere near Louisiana. In parts of central Texas, it was a smoked link from a Czech meat market that had been in business since before anyone on the block was born. You ate them with a squeeze of yellow mustard and nothing else. Number 9. Waldorf salad. Diced apples, sliced celery, halved grapes, and chopped walnuts, all folded together in mayonnaise. Some versions added miniature marshmallows, which pushed it from a recognizable side dish into something nobody could classify at all. The original came out of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York back in the 1890s and contained nothing but apples, celery, and mayo. By the 1960s, decades of church cookbook tinkering had stretched and sweetened it until it barely resembled where it started. Women brought it to cookouts in a glass bowl and set it down between the coleslaw and the baked beans, where it sat without a clear identity. Too sweet for a real salad, not sweet enough to count as dessert. People ate it anyway because at a cookout, you ate what was in front of you. Number 8. Sheet cake frosted right in the pan. Baked in a 9x13 aluminum pan, iced while the cake was still hot from the oven, and carried to the cookout with a sheet of foil pressed over the top to keep the bugs off. Chocolate was the standard. The frosting was cooked on the stove with butter, cocoa powder, powdered sugar, milk, and a splash of vanilla, poured on thick enough to fill every crack and set into a smooth, glossy shell. Nobody sliced it in the kitchen. You brought a butter knife and cut squares right out of the pan at the table. People ate them off paper plates with their fingers. Nobody asked for a fork. The sheet cake survived a car ride across town, fed 30 people from one pan, and never once required a cake stand or a pedestal. Number 7. Jalapeno peppers stuffed with cream cheese and wrapped in bacon. Each pepper halved lengthwise, seeds scraped out with a spoon, the cavity filled with a thick smear of softened cream cheese, the whole thing wrapped tight in a strip of raw bacon and pinned shut with a wooden toothpick. They went on the grill over indirect heat until the bacon crisped up and the cheese melted, and the pepper softened without falling apart. In the 1960s, this was considered exotic at most cookouts. Families outside of Texas and the Southwest had never handled a fresh jalapeno in their lives. The people who brought these were usually from somewhere where hot peppers were just another item on the grocery list, not a novelty. Half the guests ate them and loved the heat. The other half spent 10 minutes looking for something cold to drink. Number 6. Chili served from a cast-iron Dutch oven. Somebody always brought a pot of chili to the cookout, even when the temperature was pushing 90 degrees in July. Ground beef browned with diced onions, canned tomatoes, kidney beans, chili powder, cumin, a bay leaf, and salt. It simmered on the stove all morning, then traveled to the cookout in the same heavy pot it was cooked in, the lid held down tight with a folded dish towel. At the party, it sat on the edge of the grill grate to stay warm, and people ladled it over hot dogs, spooned it onto plates next to cornbread, or just ate it straight from a paper cup with a plastic spoon. Nobody ever questioned why someone brought chili to a summer cookout. If somebody made it and carried it over, you ate it. Number 5. A whole watermelon sliced on newspaper. It showed up in the back of somebody's truck or the trunk of a car, heavy and dark green with a pale belly, cold if the person who brought it had the good sense to refrigerate it the night before. You set it on a stack of newspaper on the tailgate or the end of the picnic table, split it in half with the biggest knife the kitchen owned, then carved it into wedges thick enough to grip with both hands. The juice ran everywhere, down arms, onto shirts, into the grass. Kids chased each other around the yard with the rinds. Seeds got spit off the porch in contests nobody ever scored. There was no recipe. Just a melon, cut open in the sun, and somehow that was the thing everybody remembered longest. Number 4. Catfish fillets grilled on a sheet of foil. You caught them yourself or bought them from a roadside fish stand or a neighbor who spent the morning at the river. The fillets were thin and delicate, which meant they broke apart on an open grate before you could get a spatula under them. The solution was a piece of aluminum foil, lightly greased with butter, laid flat across the grill bars. The fish went on with salt, pepper, a squeeze of lemon juice, and a dusting of paprika. 5 minutes each side, and no more than that. In the South and the lower Midwest, catfish at the cookout was as ordinary as ground beef was everywhere else. Families who lived near creeks and farm ponds had been cooking fish over open fire for generations. The backyard grill just made it a little more civilized. Number 3. Fried chicken brought to the cookout in a brown paper sack. Fried at home that morning in a cast-iron skillet full of Crisco, drained on a wire rack, and packed into a grocery bag lined with paper towels. It traveled on the back seat, and by the time you pulled it out, it was room temperature, which is exactly how it was meant to be eaten. The paper absorbed excess grease instead of trapping steam the way plastic wrap would, so the breading held its crunch for hours. The seasoning was buttermilk and flour, but every woman had her own blend, and she did not share it with anyone. The fried chicken was the dish that started arguments, quiet ones. The kind where somebody's aunt tasted a piece, nodded politely, and said, "Well, it is good, but it is not as good as mine." Number 2. Homemade barbecue sauce made on the stove the morning of the cookout. Ketchup, brown sugar, vinegar, Worcestershire, yellow mustard, garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. You simmered it in a saucepan until the sugar dissolved and the whole kitchen smelled like the afternoon that was coming. Some families added dark molasses for depth. Others poured in a quiet splash of bourbon when nobody was looking. The sauce traveled to the yard in a mason jar with a basting brush stuck in it, and whoever worked the grill painted it on during the last 5 minutes of cooking, because putting it on too early let the sugar burn black and turn bitter. Nobody bought barbecue sauce from a grocery store shelf until sometime in the 1980s. Before that, if you did not cook your own, you simply went without. And the homemade batch was always better, because the person stirring the pot kept tasting and adjusting until it was exactly right for their family. Number 1. A whole pork shoulder cooked low and slow over coals all day long. This was the recipe that defined the entire cookout. You bought the shoulder the day before, rubbed it heavy with salt, pepper, and whatever dry spice mixture the cook believed in, and put it on the grill before the sun came up. Then you sat in a lawn chair and watched it. You adjusted the coals every hour. You sprayed the meat with apple cider vinegar from a bottle when the bark looked dry. You covered it and walked away and came back and covered it again. You did this for 12 hours straight. The neighborhood came and went all day. Kids rode past on their bikes and asked if it was done yet. It was never done, until suddenly it was. And when the cook finally pulled the bone clean from the meat with one hand and the whole shoulder collapsed into long, soft strands, you piled those strands onto a white bread bun and pressed it flat with your palm. The cookout was never about doing things fast. It was about one person deciding that the people on this block were worth an entire day of tending a fire, adjusting coals, and waiting in the heat. That pork shoulder was not just a recipe. It was a promise that somebody kept. Creamed onions were the pearly white side dish that appeared in silver serving bowls at Christmas dinners across America, their mild sweetness balanced by rich bechamel. Small pearl onions were peeled by hand, a tedious job that left cooks weeping but yielded incomparable results. The onions were simmered until just tender, then folded into a sauce of butter, flour, cream, and sometimes a touch of nutmeg that coated each pearl in velvety richness. The finished dish looked almost like a dessert, the pale onions glistening in their creamy bath. Families passed the bowl around the table, spooning modest portions alongside roast beef or turkey. The flavor was subtle, the onions sweet and soft against the rich sauce. Making creamed onions from scratch required patience and skill, the sauce needing constant attention to prevent lumps. By the 1980s, frozen pearl onions and canned cream soups had replaced the handmade version, and eventually the dish vanished entirely from most Christmas tables. Before Hamburger Helper arrived in 1971, people stretching ground beef into a full dinner were already doing it themselves, and in New England, they'd called the result American chop suey for decades, a name with nothing to do with Chinese food and everything to do with the Depression-era habit of giving humble dishes whatever label made dinner sound more interesting. Brown the beef with diced onion, pour in undiluted Campbell's tomato soup and a can of water, bring to a simmer, drop in dry elbow macaroni right in the skillet, stir for 20 minutes. The Encyclopedia of American Food and Drink traces chop suey in American usage to the late 19th century, but the elbow mac version became the signature of New England working-class cooking in the post-war years. The Midwest called it American goulash. Parts of the South called it macaroni red. It fed whoever needed feeding, by whatever name, and left the pot easy to wash. When cooking alone, that mattered almost as much as the eating. Number 21. Chicken a la king in pastry shells. Diced cooked chicken folded into a sherry cream sauce with mushrooms, pimientos, and green peas, ladled into a Pepperidge Farm puff pastry shell that you pulled out of the freezer that morning. It was the dish a hostess made when the boss came over. It was also what showed up at every wedding reception, club dinner, and junior league luncheon between 1955 and 1969. The writer Calvin Trillin once wondered in print where it had gone, because for 2 decades it was everywhere. Convenience killed it. By the 1980s, the pastry shells were hard to find and the sherry felt fussy. The recipe sits in 70-year-old binders, splashed and yellowed, waiting for a hostess who is not coming back. You will not find it on a restaurant menu in any major city. You will find it tucked inside a church cookbook from Indianapolis printed in 1968. Plum pudding with hard sauce was the English tradition that concluded Christmas dinner with theatrical flames and boozy richness. The pudding itself was made weeks in advance, a dense mixture of sweet, dried fruits, spices, and breadcrumbs that aged until the flavors melded into something complex and deeply satisfying. On Christmas Day, the pudding was steamed for hours, then turned onto a platter and doused with brandy that was set alight, the blue flames dancing across its dark surface while guests applauded. Hard sauce, butter creamed with powdered sugar and more brandy, melted over hot slices, adding richness to every bite. Finding the hidden coin or charm baked inside brought luck to the finder. Families with English roots maintained this tradition for generations, the pudding recipe handed down carefully. The labor required and changing tastes that favored lighter desserts eventually ended the tradition for most families. Plum pudding represented a Christmas that demanded effort and rewarded patience. Welsh rarebit, the name that made it sound like it required a hunting license, was sharp cheddar melted with Worcestershire sauce, dry mustard, and a splash of dark beer or milk poured over toast. The dish had been an English tavern staple since the 18th century, appearing in cookbooks as Welsh rabbit as early as 1725, and crossed into American kitchens as a dignified supper for the person who had cheese, bread, and little else. In the 1960s, it still appeared in Good Housekeeping as a savory, sophisticated but cheap. The trick nobody figured out alone. Heat had to stay low and the cheese stirred constantly, never boiling, or the sauce broke into a greasy slick and a rubbery lump. You learned this once by ruining it. Then you never forgot the temperature. The people who made rarebit well had been shown at the stove by someone who'd also been shown, the recipe passing hand to hand, not page to page, until the line of hands ran out and the dish quietly stopped showing up on Tuesday nights. There was no announcement. It just stopped. Number 15, beef stroganoff over noodles. A pound of sirloin tips browned hard in a skillet, finished with sliced mushrooms and a pan sauce of beef broth, mustard, and a half pint of sour cream stirred in off the heat. Spooned over wide egg noodles. The dish came home with American GIs from Europe and entered the home cooking magazines by 1955. Through the 1960s, every Betty Crocker cookbook had a version. It was Saturday night dinner before company arrived. Fancy enough to feel like a treat, fast enough to make in 40 minutes. The sour cream curdled if the heat got too high. Mothers warned daughters about that one over the phone. By the time Hamburger Helper arrived in 1971 with a powdered version, the from-scratch dish was already retreating to special occasions. Today, it has retreated all the way out of the rotation. Oyster stew was the Christmas Eve tradition that brought coastal flavors to holiday tables across America, even in landlocked states. Fresh oysters were gently poached in their own liquor with butter, cream, and just enough seasoning to enhance their briny sweetness. The stew was served in warmed bowls with oyster crackers floating on top, each spoonful delivering plump oysters in rich, silky broth. Families maintained this tradition from generations past, when oysters were abundant and affordable enough for working-class celebrations. The dish required restraint. Overcooking turned oysters rubbery. Too much seasoning masked their delicate flavor. Some families added celery or a touch of sherry, but purists insisted on simplicity. By the 1980s, oyster prices had risen and the tradition faded. Those who grew up with oyster stew Christmas Eves remember the ritual of shucking, the anticipation, and the briny warmth that meant the holiday had truly begun. Creamed dried beef had a nickname men who'd served never quite stopped using. Unsuitable for cookbooks, but right at home in kitchens where someone had learned to cook on a military budget. The recipe: a small jar of armored dried beef soaked briefly in cold water to pull back the salt, torn into pieces, folded into a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, black pepper, ladled over toast. The toast had to be properly done, golden, not pale, because the sauce soaked through soft bread in 40 seconds flat, and everyone who'd made it more than once knew to watch the toaster. The jar cost about 20 cents. The flour and milk cost almost nothing. It was the meal of men who'd come home from service and never quite returned to spending money the way civilians did, carrying a wartime economy through the 1950s and into the 60s on a budget that existed only in their own kitchens. The jars have retreated to specialty shelves now, waiting for someone who still knows what they're for. Number 20, tuna noodle casserole. A can of chicken of the sea, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, a bag of egg noodles, a handful of frozen peas, and a crushed potato chip topping baked until the edges browned. A 1959 Federal Fisheries survey found that 8 out of 10 American households served canned tuna once a week, and the casserole sat at the top of that list. Through the 1960s, it was the dish a working mother slid into the oven before she changed out of her work clothes. The whole thing cost about 90 cents and fed 5. Picture the smell of cream of mushroom hitting the egg noodles in a galley kitchen in Wichita on a Tuesday in 1966. It survives in church potlucks but rarely on weeknight tables. The frozen peas have been replaced by takeout, the noodles by penny, and the casserole by nothing in particular. The recipe is still on the back of the Campbell's can. Almost nobody reads the back of the can anymore. Waldorf salad was the crisp, creamy combination that brought elegance to Christmas tables. It's apples, celery, and walnuts dressed in mayonnaise and served on lettuce cups. Created at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the salad spread to home kitchens where it became synonymous with refined holiday dining. The apples were diced small, their tartness balanced by creamy mayonnaise and crunchy walnuts. Some cooks added grapes or raisins for extra sweetness, while others kept it simple. The salad was served on beds of iceberg lettuce, its pale colors looking sophisticated against the green. Making Waldorf salad required careful timing. The apples would brown if prepared too early, so it was often made just before serving. The dish represented the era's fascination with hotel cuisine, when recreating restaurant dishes at home was a mark of sophistication. Waldorf salad has largely vanished from Christmas tables, replaced by green salads that seem lighter and more modern. Egg foo young was the exotic dinner you made for pennies, the meal that let someone in a studio apartment feel, briefly, like the takeout window was open just for them. The recipe appeared in 1960s cookbooks everywhere: Better Homes and Gardens, Betty Crocker, women's magazines, because Chinese-American food had become something home cooks wanted to approximate without going out. Beat eggs with drained canned bean sprouts, sliced scallions, a spoonful of soy sauce, and whatever cooked chicken sat in the refrigerator, then fry small patties in oil until the bottoms browned. The brown gravy, beef broth thickened with cornstarch, a little soy for color, went poured over the top. The dish had roots in Cantonese cooking, but the American home version was its own invention, softer and adapted to whatever the cabinet held. The women who made it wrote the recipe on index cards and gave copies to their daughters. Most of those cards are in junk drawers now, ink faded past reading. Number 18. Stuffed cabbage rolls. Boiled cabbage leaves wrapped around a filling of ground beef, ground pork, onion, and white rice, packed shoulder to shoulder in a deep pot, simmered for 2 hours in tomato sauce. Polish neighborhoods in Hamtramck and Buffalo called them golubki. Slovak families in Pittsburgh called them halupki. By the 1960s, the second generation had anglicized them to stuffed cabbage and served them on church basement tables every Friday during Lent. The dish was an immigrant inheritance that survived Ellis Island and 2 world wars. What it could not survive was the third generation moving to the suburbs and learning to call them weird. A retired mill worker in Cleveland still made 100 at a time and froze them in Maxwell House coffee cans. He died in 1991, and the recipe died with him. The grandchildren remembered the smell. They could not remember the proportions. The cabbage went back to coleslaw, the ground meat went into hamburgers, and the rice ended up in a side dish nobody named. And the dish became a memory of a smell instead of a recipe. Number 18 went from a Sunday tradition to a museum entry inside one generation. That was how fast a dinner could vanish. Chestnut stuffing was the old-fashioned filling that connected American Christmas to European traditions, its sweet nuttiness complementing roast poultry perfectly. Fresh chestnuts were scored, roasted until the shells split, then peeled. A labor-intensive process that took hours but yielded incomparable flavor. The peeled chestnuts were crumbled and mixed with bread cubes, sausage, onions, and herbs, the mixture moistened with stock. The texture was substantial, the chestnuts adding richness that dried bread alone couldn't provide. Families with European heritage maintained this tradition, passing down techniques for the temperamental nuts. Fresh chestnuts were available only seasonally, sold by street vendors who knew their customers waited all year. This stuffing has nearly disappeared, replaced by packaged versions that can't match the original. The labor required, and the disappearance of fresh chestnut vendors, ended a tradition that once defined Christmas flavor. The can of corned beef hash told you nothing useful. Dense, brick red, smelling faintly of iron. Anyone meeting it for the first time would have reservations. The people who knew it understood one rule: put it in the skillet and leave it alone. Crumble in with diced onion, spread flat, press lightly, and abandon for 8 full minutes while a dark crust builds on the bottom. Turn once, one time only, let the other side catch. With an egg on top, it was a complete dinner for under a quarter. Armour was the standard, about 19 cents a can in the 1960s. The men who lived on it, the widowers, the newly divorced, the ones on a hot plate in a furnished room, would tell you it tasted fine. Some would tell you it tasted exactly like getting through the week. The egg on top was what made it worth sitting down for. Number 24, creamed chipped beef on toast. Thin slices of dried, salted beef pulled from a small Armour glass jar, stirred into a roux of butter, flour, and whole milk, then poured over toasted Wonder Bread. The Army called it SOS. The Navy made it with tomato. Civilian families inherited it from fathers who had eaten it on ships and at Fort Bragg. It became a Sunday night supper because it cost almost nothing and could be on the table in 12 minutes. Picture a husband home from second shift, eating it standing at the counter while the kids did homework. By the late 1960s, the Armour jar was migrating to the back of the grocery shelf. The veterans who learned to love it began passing, and their grandchildren had no taste for the salt or the memory. The dish refused to disappear in military families where you could still find it on a Sunday plate as late as 1978, and the recipe still works the way it used to, but the audience for it does not. Ambrosia salad was the fluffy, sweet concoction that straddled the line between side dish and dessert, its marshmallows and coconut creating something uniquely American. Canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, and maraschino cherries were folded with miniature marshmallows, shredded coconut, and sour cream. The mixture was chilled overnight, allowing flavors to meld and marshmallows to soften. Served in cut glass bowls, the pastel colors seemed appropriately festive. Children especially loved ambrosia, often requesting second helpings despite protests about ruining their appetite. The dish required no cooking, making it perfect for busy kitchens where oven space was precious. Some families added pecans or used cottage cheese, each variation reflecting regional preferences. Ambrosia has largely disappeared from Christmas tables, dismissed as too sweet and artificial, but for decades it was a beloved tradition that children anticipated all year. Tamale pie was what you made when ground beef and a can of beans needed to become something that actually felt like dinner. Brown the beef with onion and garlic, add kidney beans, canned tomatoes, chili powder, and cumin, let it thicken. Pour a cornbread batter over the top, cornmeal, flour, egg, milk, bake at 400 degrees for 25 minutes. The recipe had circulated in American cookbooks since the 1930s, when Midwestern agricultural extension pamphlets recommended it as a practical way to stretch inexpensive ground beef. By the 1960s, it appeared in budget cookbooks nationwide, often noted as makes 2 meals. The genius was the crust. It absorbed the chili juices from below while baking, so the bottom was dark and moist and spiced while the top stayed dry and crisp. 2 completely different textures in the same dish. You had to decide which half you wanted first. Both choices were right, and you never quite made up your mind before the dish was empty. Number 22, Swiss steak. A round steak pounded thin with the edge of a saucer, dredged in flour, browned in a heavy skillet, then braised for 2 hours with stewed tomatoes, green pepper, and onion until a fork could cut it. 49 cents a pound at the A&P in 1964. The technique was called Swissing because the meat got rolled between fluted rollers at the butcher counter to break the fibers. Every family had a Wednesday version. The gravy went over mashed potatoes or buttered noodles. By the time microwaves hit kitchens in the late 1970s, nobody had 2 hours for a weeknight braise anymore. And the dish that smelled like Wednesday across half of America began to fade. But you could still find it on the menu of small-town diners through 1991, listed under blue plate specials with mashed potatoes and green beans for $3.75. Roast duck with orange sauce was the continental-inspired dish that sophisticated families served to demonstrate their worldly tastes. The duck was pricked all over to release fat, then roasted slowly until the skin turned impossibly crisp while the meat stayed moist. Orange sauce was made from scratch, combining fresh juice, zest, stock, and sometimes Grand Marnier into something bright that balanced the rich meat. The presentation was classic. Sliced duck breast fanned across plates, sauce drizzled artfully, orange segments providing color. This was aspirational cooking, inspired by French restaurants and Julia Child's television appearances. Duck required more skill than turkey or chicken, its higher fat content demanding different techniques. The dish represented cultural ambition, families embracing international cuisine as a mark of sophistication. Today, duck rarely appears on home Christmas tables, reserved for restaurants where few experience its former holiday glory. Franks and beans was the dinner you made when the clock said 6:30, the wallet said empty, and the skillet was already on the burner before your coat was off. You opened a can of Van Camp's pork and beans, always Van Camp's, the sauce thicker than any store brand, sliced your Oscar Mayer wieners on the diagonal, added brown sugar and a squeeze of yellow mustard, and in 10 minutes had something smelling like a cookout for 30 cents. The trick was heat. Too high and the beans scorched to the bottom. Low and slow, lid half on, until the sauce thickened and the hot dog swelled and split at the edges. You ate it from the pan sometimes, crackers instead of a fork. Nobody was watching. That's the part nobody tells you about cooking alone. The freedom of it, the lack of theater. By the 1970s, frozen dinners brought the competition, and Franks and beans quietly left the table. The skillet that made it went to an estate sale with everything else. Number 25, tomato aspic salad. A ring of tomato juice, gelatin, and finely chopped celery, unmolded onto an iceberg leaf with a dollop of Hellmann's mayonnaise dropped in the center. Hostesses called it a salad because it was cold and it jiggled. It first appeared on suburban dinner tables in the late 1950s and held its place through the early 1960s as the marker that a housewife could afford a refrigerator and the time it took to chill 3 layers. Imagine a copper ring mold sweating in a Frigidaire next to a glass dish of deviled eggs. The Jell-O brand even sold a seasoned tomato flavor in the 1960s, packaged for exactly this dish at 23 cents a box. By 1968, Better Homes started running fewer molded salads and more crisp greens, and the aspic ring slid quietly out of the dinner party rotation. Today, nobody under 60 has tasted one. The dish belongs to the era when sophistication was measured by how cleanly something slid out of a copper mold. Baked ham with pineapple rings and maraschino cherries was the iconic centerpiece that defined American Christmas through the 1960s and 70s. The ham, usually a bone-in shank or butt portion, was scored in diamond patterns, each intersection studded with a whole clove that released fragrance as it baked. Canned pineapple rings were arranged across the surface and secured with toothpicks, a bright red cherry placed in each ring's center. Brown sugar and mustard glaze was brushed over everything, caramelizing into sticky sweetness that dripped down the sides. The presentation was unmistakably festive, the ham gleaming amber and gold under dining room lights. Slicing revealed pink meat with that distinctive ham flavor that paired perfectly with sweet glaze. Families served this alongside scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, and dinner rolls. The pineapple cherry ham has become a punchline today, dismissed as kitschy, but for millions it represented Christmas abundance and maternal love. Potato soup asked nothing and gave back more than seemed fair. 2 potatoes, 1 onion, water to cover, salt, 20 minutes on the back burner. When the potatoes softened, you added milk, butter, a heavy grind of black pepper. The move no cookbook explained well. Mash a few pieces against the side of the pot while leaving the rest in chunks so the broth thickened without going smooth, and every spoonful had something to bite. It cost under 20 cents in the early 1960s. It was the soup of people living alone after something, a divorce, a death, a child who left and took all the noise. You made it because it filled the kitchen with a plain, honest smell and fed you without requiring thought. She made it every winter. You knew that version by heart, the way she never once measured the milk. The version you make now is close. Every time you sit down alone with it, close is not the same thing. Number 17, glazed ham loaf with pineapple. A 2-pound loaf made from ground-cured ham mixed with ground pork, bound with breadcrumbs and an egg, baked in a ring mold, crowned with Dole pineapple rings and brown sugar that caramelized in the last 20 minutes. Pennsylvania Dutch country invented it. Church suppers from York to Lancaster served it on long tables every other Sunday. Through the 1960s, butchers ground their ham trimmings into loaves wrapped in white paper and labeled by hand for housewives to take home for about $1 a pound. By 1985, most butcher counters had been replaced by plastic-wrapped meat in the cold case. The ham loaf went with them. The pineapple ring still shows up on the occasional Easter ham, but it is a ghost of a ghost. You will not find a butcher who grinds his own ham loaf mix in any chain grocery store today. Stuffed Cornish game hens were the elegant individual servings that made every guest feel specially honored at Christmas dinner. These small birds, each just large enough for one person, were stuffed with wild rice, dried fruit, and nuts before roasting to golden perfection. The presentation was stunning, each guest receiving their own whole bird, its skin crackling and its cavity overflowing with aromatic stuffing. Carving was unnecessary. Diners simply cut into their personal hen, the juices pooling on the plate. Families who served Cornish hens were making a statement about sophistication and abundance, providing individual birds rather than slicing from a shared roast. The hens were often glazed with orange or apricot preserves, adding sweetness and shine. This dish represented the era's fascination with elevated home entertaining when suburban hostesses aspired to elegance. Cornish hens have largely disappeared from Christmas tables, replaced by simpler preparations. The porcupine meatball looked like a trick and worked like one. Mix ground beef with raw, uncooked rice, dry, straight from the bag, shape into balls, drop into a pot with condensed tomato soup and half a can of water, lid on, simmer 45 minutes. What emerged had rice grains poking through the surface on every side like quills, cooked entirely inside the meat, each grain swollen and soft. The technique came from Depression-era cooks who found that raw rice in a meatball stretched the meat further while adding a texture nothing else could replicate, and it appeared in Betty Crocker's picture cookbook in 1950, one of the best-selling cookbooks in American history. By the 1960s, it was in every budget cookbook in America, recommended for one-person cooking. A half recipe made 3 or 4 meatballs, a complete solo dinner in its own sauce. The trick was leaving the lid completely alone for the full 45 minutes. The people who knew the recipe had been shown how. Everyone else lifted the lid early and wondered why the rice was still crunchy. Number 19. Salisbury Steak TV Dinner. 1 ground beef patty in dark brown gravy, a scoop of mashed potatoes, a square of corn, and a brownie compartment sealed in an aluminum tray and slid into a Swanson box. Swanson introduced its Salisbury steak dinner in 1962. By the middle of the decade, frozen TV dinners were on the menu in millions of American homes once or twice a week, eaten on metal trays in front of Bonanza or The Ed Sullivan Show. Families stopped trying to make Salisbury steak from scratch because the frozen one came out the same every time. The homemade version, a Wednesday night patty smothered in mushroom gravy, faded inside 10 years. When TV dinners faded in the 1980s, the dish faded with them. The brownie compartment was the first thing the kids ate and the last thing anyone remembers. You can still buy a Salisbury steak frozen dinner today, but the gravy tastes like a copy of a copy. Creamed spinach was the emerald green side dish that proved vegetables could be just as indulgent as any main course, its velvety texture and subtle flavor pleasing even spinach skeptics. Fresh spinach was washed thoroughly, wilted in butter, then combined with a rich bechamel sauce flavored with nutmeg and sometimes a touch of garlic. The finished dish was deep green and creamy, each bite smooth and satisfying. Steakhouses made creamed spinach famous, but home cooks recreated it for Christmas dinners when only the finest sides would do. The dish required fresh spinach. Frozen wouldn't achieve the same texture. And careful attention to the sauce. Families served it in small portions, understanding its richness. Creamed spinach represented the era's appreciation for technique over convenience, when vegetable dishes were crafted rather than simply steamed. It has largely disappeared from home cooking, surviving mainly in upscale restaurants. The smell of salmon patties hit you before you were fully inside, warm and oceanic, meaning someone was making something out of nothing. Canned pink salmon, bones left in because they were soft enough to eat, and every mother insisted they were good for you, got flaked with crumbled saltines, 1 egg, a spoonful of yellow mustard, and dried onion flakes. Shaped with wet hands into a skillet where Crisco was already shimmering. 2 minutes aside, 3 if you wanted the crust darker. The outside turned copper penny brown. The inside stayed barely warm at center. Tartar sauce if you had it, ketchup if you didn't. A whole generation kept a can of salmon in the back of the cabinet the way they kept a $20 bill in a shoe. Not for every day, but for when everything ran out. Canned salmon cost under 40 cents in the early 1960s. The patties made from it tasted like a cook who knew what to do with 40 cents. Most of those cooks are gone now, and the cans in the back of the cabinet have been gathering dust. Number 23, liver and onions. A pound of sliced calf liver dredged in seasoned flour, seared in bacon drippings, and smothered in onions cooked until they collapsed. Mashed potatoes on the side, a glass of milk for the kids who knew better than to argue. Through the 1960s, your grandmother kept liver on the rotation every other Thursday because it was cheap and what the doctor told a tired wife to feed her husband. The dish disappeared because the children who choked it down vowed never to serve it themselves. By 1985, most butchers had stopped carrying it in the front case. What most people miss about Thursday liver is how completely a weeknight staple could vanish in 20 years. One generation ate it without question. The next refused to even smell it. Standing rib roast was the king of Christmas meats. Its impressive size and rich marbling commanding respect from the moment it emerged from the oven. Butchers prepared these roasts with the bones still attached, creating a natural rack that elevated the meat for even cooking. The exterior was rubbed with garlic, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs, then roasted at high heat to create a deeply browned crust before the temperature dropped for slow cooking. Slicing revealed a gradient from well-done edges to rosy pink centers, allowing guests to choose their preferred doneness. The bones were fought over, gnawed clean at the table, or saved for soup. Yorkshire pudding was the traditional accompaniment, the batter puffing dramatically in the hot beef drippings. This was investment cooking, the roast costing more than a week's grocery budget, but justified by the holiday's importance. Standing rib roast represented prosperity and tradition, connecting American families to English Christmas customs. The box of rice-a-roni had been in American cabinets since 1958, and by the early 1960s, it had become the standard dinner for anyone cooking alone who wanted something that felt more like cooking than it was. The technique was everything. Melt butter in the skillet, add the dry rice and broken vermicelli from the box, and toast them together, stirring constantly until the pasta turned amber and the rice went translucent. Then water, then the seasoning packet, lid on, heat down. Those 2 minutes of dry toasting gave the dish a nutty depth that plain boiled rice never had. The step people who didn't know the rule always skipped, wondering later why theirs tasted flat. Golden Grain Company developed the original in San Francisco, after co-founder Vince DeDomenico watched a neighbor combine rice and pasta in the early 1950s. 19 cents a box. You could eat it plain. You could pull in a leftover chicken thigh and call it a proper dinner. Either way, it was ready before you finished changing out of your work clothes. Number 16, pork chops and applesauce with shake and bake. 4 bone-in chops shaken in a paper bag of seasoned breadcrumbs and baked at 425 until the coating turned crisp. A jar of Mott's applesauce on the side, lukewarm, straight from the refrigerator. Shake and Bake hit shelves in 1965, and within 4 years, it was in roughly 1 in 3 American kitchens. The Brady Bunch made the line famous when Peter Brady said pork chops and applesauce in his Humphrey Bogart voice. The dish was Tuesday and Thursday food. It was simple. It was effective. By the 1990s, the box had moved to the bottom shelf. The chops thinned out. The applesauce got organic. Nobody under 40 knows the rhythm of shaking a bag, the small percussive sound it made. Seafood. Newburgh was the luxurious first course that opened Christmas dinner with creamy richness and delicate shellfish. Lobster, shrimp, and sometimes crab meat were gently folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, and sherry. The mixture served over toast points or in patty shells. The sauce was velvety and rich, coating each piece of seafood in decadent luxury that justified its holiday placement. Making Newburg required careful technique. The egg yolks could curdle if the sauce got too hot, ruining everything. Families served this as a first course before the main roast, a statement of abundance and sophistication. The dish came from Delmonico's restaurant in New York, spreading to home kitchens where ambitious cooks recreated its elegance. Seafood Newburg represented the era's formal dining culture, when Christmas dinner was multiple courses served with ceremony. It has largely vanished, replaced by simpler appetizers that don't require last-minute sauce making. If rice-a-roni was what you made when the cabinet was stocked, cream of mushroom pork chops was what you made when the refrigerator held exactly one pork chop and a single can of Campbell's. Season the chop, brown it in butter, move it to a baking dish, pour the condensed soup directly over the top, undiluted, straight from the can, and bake at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. The steam and the meat's own moisture thinned the soup to a sauce, and the chop came out tender, sitting in a pale gravy you mopped up with bread. Campbell's had been suggesting this combination since the early 1950s, and by the 1960s it appeared in household recipe files under names like Company Pork Chops, even when the only company was the cook. The knowledge that one can and 30 minutes could turn a thin pork chop into something genuinely good traveled neighbor to neighbor over back fences, written on cards, shared in parish newsletters. Then it just stopped being passed. Pick one of these, just one. This weekend, make it. If you have a grill, light it up. If you have a stove, that works just fine. Set a plate outside, even if it is on the back step, and eat it where the air can reach you. Try the mustard potato salad, the Italian sausage with the peppers, or the barbecue sauce from scratch. Drop a comment and let me know which recipe your family made every summer.